In case anyone wants to watch, people are trickling in. I also want to verify that all the streams are working. So let's start. Let me put this back on. Let's start with, make that bigger for when we get there in a second. Let's go to Restream. I just want to make sure the stream preview is working properly. Okay, that looks good. I haven't done this in a while where I go through all of these, so I just want to do that. Give people time to trickle in, and then we'll start programming here pretty shortly. Okay, I just want to get some audio going on this thing. Okay, cool. Awesome. So Twitch is looking good. Twitch looks real good. Let's see. What else do we got? We got Facebook to check out here. Go to my personal page. Okay. My personal page. Good. Awesome. All right, let's go to the ChevCast page. Okay. Okay, that looks good too. And then Periscope. Oh, hello, host 00312. Thank you for the follow. Much appreciated. Periscope. Periscope. I've never used Periscope. This is clearly not it. This is some other crap. Twitter Periscope. Huh. I guess you must just have to use the app or something. We won't worry about it. If Restream says it's good, then we'll just let Restream handle it. All right, just YouTube now. So let's check the ChevCast channel. Search accounts. There we go. ChevCast. And we're actually doing 2 YouTube channels today. ChevCast channel. Awesome. Should be 1080p, I hope. Search accounts. There we go. ChevCast. And we're actually doing 2 YouTube channels. We're actually doing 2 YouTube channels. Okay, sorry. And then let's go over to the ChevTech one. There we go. ChevCast. Cool. We're actually doing 2 YouTube channels. We're actually doing 2 YouTube channels. We're getting all meta. All right. I think we're good to go. Maybe you read that tweet wrong, Azula. Okay. Sorry, just had to answer a Discord that I wanted to comment on. Okay, so let's get started then. It's been a little bit since I looked at this project. What I want to do is just kind of create a list of things that we have to do. So let's just go through these tickets one by one here that I created. So the homepage with live stream feed, real-time chat, and ways to donate, embedded recent YouTube videos if live stream is offline. So yes, I'm kind of envisioning the homepage to be just kind of this place where we feature a bunch of content. obviously any live streams from ChevCast will be right there, prominent with the chat and everything. That's what I want to do. In order to do that, though, it's going to take a little bit of effort because I'm not sure if we want to embed Twitch. I'm not sure if we want to actually just add a what's it called, RTMP endpoint on Windows Azure, so we have our very own live stream that we can stream to. And let's actually, you know what? Let's look at that real fast. Restream. Can we just add an arbitrary RTMP endpoint to this? Custom RTMP. Yep, right there. Perfect. That might be the best way to go. We'll see when we get there, because the nice thing about embedding like Twitch is that we can embed the Twitch chat right alongside it, and we don't really have to worry about it too much. And the Restream service that we're using is actually pretty cool because it's got a relay chatbot that relays all the stream chats from YouTube, Twitch, even a Discord channel in our Discord server. It relays all that stuff around. So anyway, we'll figure out what we want to embed there. But basically, any live stream needs to be prominent, and then we want to show past videos and stuff on YouTube, like have a recent videos on YouTube section. I think I want that there, even if the live stream is going just like below that. But I also want to have a list of people's streams. So when you sign up through the site, you're going to be able to create your own D&D campaigns. And through that, you'll also be able to upload your own D&D episodes or list your live streams, that kind of stuff. And so I want, since we'll have a list of people's channels, live streams, their Twitch, I would like to feature those if they're online. So unfortunately, Twitch lets you do hosting. If you've ever used Twitch, you can host someone else's channel. It's cool. It'll put their channel on your page. But what actually happens there is I thought they were just taking that video and piping it into the ChevCast feed. Like if I host someone else, I thought their video was coming through my video feed. But actually all they really do is swap out the embedded video player on the page for the one from that other profile. What that means is, though, is when I embed the ChevCast video player on the site, the Twitch player, it will not show hosted channels. So we kind of need to maintain our own list of people we want to host and manually embed them in the page. So that's something we're going to get to on the home page there. So that's a lot of stuff we're going to have to do. Let's make a list, actually, of external services we're going to have to talk to. Okay, so we're going to have to talk to the Twitch API for sure. We're going to have to talk to the YouTube API for sure to get those recent YouTube videos and all that stuff. This is going to be a little difficult. I'm actually wondering if we should embed the YouTube player on the page and the YouTube's chat. I'm sure there's got to be a way to do that. I've never done it before. But the reason I'm thinking that is YouTube has this feature you can do premieres, so you can pre-record a video, upload it, and then you can schedule it for a premiere, and basically it's like a live watch party. You can watch the premiere with other people and chat with them in real time about the video, get real-time feedback about your video, which is kind of cool, and I might want to do that sometime. And when I do that, obviously I would want that to appear on the ChevCast homepage. And we're not really going to ever do that with Twitch, right? If I premiere, I wish I could premiere to Restream and basically make it a live stream. I mean, I guess I could live stream the premiere. I don't know. We'll worry about that. Either way, we're going to have to talk to Twitch and YouTube. Okay. What other? Let's see. Campaign directory showing existing public campaigns. All right, so we're going to be using MongoDB, I think. And we're probably going to just stick with using Mongoose as our ORM. So that's going to be our database, basically. RSS feed. Page about my Delta. About page. Login, sign up buttons. Okay. So what I want for this is, can I make this bigger? Oh yeah, sweet. I want the ChevCast Community Discord server here to be the center of everything. So you'll notice here, every campaign, every D&D campaign we have, like we have a Ballad of Creation here, has a text channel and a voice channel. I want all this stuff to be automatically created by the website. So we're going to have to talk through the Discord API. I don't know if that means we need to make it an actual Discord bot that's like ever present in there, because originally I did want to do that because I wanted to have bot commands. But then I realized, you know what, if we're having a user interface anyway through the website, everything that I'd want to do with a bot command, I'd rather do through a website with a proper interface. So, you know, some people will set up like a Discord bots that have a bunch of roles that people can do emoji reacts and get those roles assigned to them. Well, what if you just typed /roles and got a link, and the link carted you off to ChevCast.tv, and you could just check all the boxes for all the roles you want, or that kind of stuff. Like there's much more you could do with a real UI. So I'm not sure I want to waste too much time creating a bunch of bot interaction here. But yeah, so I would want these to be all automatically maintained. If you create a campaign through the site, it creates all this stuff, creates the roles necessary. If you sign up to play in a campaign, you're automatically assigned those roles as well. We are going to have an approval process for that, so you request to join. So actually, let's get there. I'm jumping ahead of myself. I just want to focus on the services we're going to use today, so not the functionality quite yet. Event creation, podcast directory showing all official ChevCast podcasts, our main D&D show at the time, plus other shows like okay. So the podcast directory, I'm trying to figure out, are we just going to keep all those in? So currently I actually use those as a Windows Azure blob storage. And I actually put metadata on the blobs, and that metadata becomes the podcast episode metadata in the generated RSS feed that's passed to iTunes and Spotify and all those places. So I currently already have a system set up there using Azure Functions. Azure Functions were so limited, though, that I wasn't able to do a lot of... I probably want to create a similar setup here, because what I was wanting to do was offer hosting to people. So if they, for free, they get out most of the functionality they get right out of the box for free. That's what I really want. I want to build a community based on this freemium model. In the future, if we want to introduce a small subscription, I'm not completely opposed. If it makes sense, we'll just have to, discuss it going forward. But regardless, I want to grandfather everybody in who currently does podcasts on our server. I'm friends with most of the people on here, and I want everyone on here to be grandfathered into the system, and I want to give them some free podcast hosting. So I thought that'd be kind of cool. So I think we're going to have to talk to Azure Blob Storage no matter what. What that means for us is... that when they upload an episode of their podcast, it's going to put it in blob storage, populate the metadata. I'm just trying to decide if I'm going to use the blob storage I have currently, because I created this whole ChevTech audio thing. Let's go to manage.windows. There's a portal. There we go. Got the old two-factor enabled because I'm getting paranoid lately. A lot of my friends and stuff been getting hacked, so I went through everything and turned on two-factor. Okay, so ChevTech Audio is this function app here. And then we've got the blob storage here. Or wait, what is that? That's a resource group. Here we go. ChevTech Podcasts. ChevTech Audio. I believe this one is actually open in Explorer. Oh, do I not have Azure Explorer yet? Apparently not. Let's go get it. So we are going to need it. Do I? Oh, I do have it. Is it not pinned to start? No, it is on the start. Where did I miss it? Oh, right there. I'm just blind. I'm just going to delete everything out of my downloads folder. It's been a while. All right. Let's check for updates real fast before I start using it. Oh, do I have another authenticated request? Re-enter credentials. Probably because of the two-factor. Great. Okay. That works. Now let's check for updates. Okay, good. I believe there's a dark mode. There we go. That's better on the eyes. Okay, yeah, so I have two storage accounts, and I believe this account is just the stuff, yeah, for the Azure functions. ChevTech Audio Content. Oh, yep. That's where the actual Node app lives for running those functions. Okay. And then podcasts is where... Okay, yeah. I have JSON files for the podcast feed, like main metadata that the feed needs, the RSS feed. You know, the title, the author, the tags for the different categories on the podcast services, all that stuff is in these files. And then the blob containers actually has the episodes of the podcasts. So like we have 2 episodes of Undoctrinate. And if we go to, is it properties? Yeah, there's metadata in here. Okay. All right, I'm thinking I already have a setup here and it's scalable. And we just need to programmatically be able to upload stuff because right now I use this Storage Explorer to upload podcasts into the blob storage. But we just need, and I couldn't figure out how to create an upload endpoint through Azure Functions, but that's okay because our new ChevCast app isn't going to be an Azure function. It's going to be an actual web app. So we should be able to interact with blob storage and stick those episodes in there. So we'll need to be able to manually add stuff to this file share. Here we go. This file share, the feeds file share. So every new campaign needs its own feed, so we'll have to add one there. And then we'll need a new blob container for every one. And then the blob container will contain all the episodes that we want in there. Okay. All right, that looks good. So Twitch, YouTube, MongoDB, Mongoose, Discord API, Azure Blob Storage. Anything else? Listing all upcoming ChevCast events. That's just going to be through Mongo. Okay. So far, so good. So what we want now is to pick our stack. So what I think I'd like to do is use React. You know, I'm actually just going to go React plus Node.js, because it's kind of go hand in hand for this. And then I'm thinking Next.js. Next.js is pretty cool, and we're going to have to like get a boilerplate running because I've never used it before. But Next.js is pretty cool because I didn't mean to type Twitter. Why did I have Twitter on there? Okay. It does server-side rendering. Basic features, static file serving, data fetching, built-in CSS support, pages. Oh yes, this is perfect. It's already got a way to define pages, and the pages just are React components. It's got a built-in way to do dynamic routing, so we don't need React Router for anything in here. That's kind of nice. And then, is it in advanced features maybe? Preview mode. I swear it talked about server-side rendering. Am I just going crazy? Server-side rendering, data fetching. We've explained that Next.js has two forms of pre-rendering, static generation and server-side rendering. This page will talk in depth about data fetching strategies for each case. Okay. Anyway, what's interesting about that is if you go to a website that just runs a regular React app, if you turn off JavaScript, all you'll see is a page with an empty div on it. And then when you turn on JavaScript, React runs, it bootstraps itself into that div, builds the component tree, fills the page with more HTML, and you have your interface. The problem with that is when web crawlers, search engines, go browsing around, and our website is definitely going to want some SEO here, some search engine optimization. When they go browsing around, they don't run JavaScript on pages. They just download the HTML document and they index a bunch of stuff on it for searching purposes. But if they go to our site, if it's just using a regular React app, it's just going to pull down a blank document. It's not going to run the JavaScript in order to generate the React app in order to generate the content that it needs to index. So one thing Next.js does is if you go to, no matter what URL you go to in your app, it will pre-render the React stuff on the server side, fill in that HTML document for this initial page load, and send it down to the server, which means that Google's web crawler and other search engines can crawl our site and actually pull down statically generated content, even though it's dynamic React stuff. So that could be pretty cool to have for SEO purposes. I think it's actually kind of a necessity. So unfortunately, that means we need to get intimate with Next, which I've never used. It's probably where we're going to start because, yes, let's see. Oh, I also want to look up Node.js LTS releases. Let's see. Which ones are the long-term support? Okay, so version 14. I don't want to use... I don't want to use Node versions that are not LTS. End of life. Let's see. End of life is 2023. So that'll be active LTS for the next 2 years. Version 16 goes LTS on October 26th. Maybe we'll stick with version 16, just knowing that it's about to go LTS. Okay, that's good. We'll stick with Node 13 or 16 for now. Let me actually reopen that and leave it open just for reference later. Okay. All right. I think we're good to actually start writing some code, believe it or not. Let's see. Let's open up this guy here. So the first thing I want to do is initialize this as a Git repo. And then I want to make a git ignore. And then we'll open that up in I'm not going to autocomplete that. Open up the git ignore here, and we're going to add node modules and any environment files we create, if any. Okay. Then we're going to add that to the repo. Probably just create a README too while we're at it. For now, on the README, we'll just put work in progress. We'll flesh this out later. But that gives us some files to have in our repo here. Okay, so initial commit. Now let's go create, because if something happens to my computer while we're mid-development, it would be real stupid to not have our project backed up to Git. So let's go to GitHub. Whoops. And we're going to create a new repository. And we're just going to call it ChevCast TV. We'll make it public. And we are not going to initialize the repository because we already did. Awesome. Okay, we're going to take this URL, git remote add origin. Oops. There we go. Ah, wait. Oh, no, that's correct. Okay. And then we are on the master branch, so we're going to push the master branch, and we're going to set the origin to... I'm having a brain fart. Set upstream. Let's make this bigger. Origin master. Okay. So that's going to push our master branch up there, but it's also going to set our local master branch to track the upstream master branch, which if you never use Git, don't worry about it, but that just means it'll make our lives a little easier. So now if we come over and refresh, we should have our files in here. Good, work in progress. Perfect. All right. So that's the beginning. Push some of these over there. Actually, close Discord. Get out of the way. Okay. I think now it's time to follow the documentation. So what I'd like to do is blip and blip, just like that. Does that still look okay on stream? I actually need to get a stream preview running. Let's see, Twitch. ChevCast. Is just like that. That still look okay on stream? I actually need to get a stream preview running. Why can't I mute the video? So I can set to audio only. Toss00312. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. I guess I've just got to turn my phone's volume down. All right, that's fine. My charger out here. We'll maximize the video. Okay, that could be a little bigger still, huh? Seems big already, but I think it needs to go up a little bit more. Font. Whoa, that's too big. Can I not go somewhere between? 36, 72. Those are the options. Can I type? Okay, looks like I can type. Whoa, wait, what? Try 50? All right, that looks a little better. I mean, I am viewing it on my phone as a preview, so probably can be a little generous. Okay. Good. All right, let's go. Let's pin this. Pin that one. Pin the Trello. Pin Restream. Well, actually, I don't need the Restream anymore because that's loaded up in OBS over here. That's fine. And then we'll pin Azure because we're probably going to need to dig into there for sure. All right. First thing we want. Oh, I need to. Forget how you echo content into a file. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's do a touch nvm rc. And then let's actually just open up the whole directory in our thing here. Okay, oh, we need to do nvm ls remote lts. Right. We were going to use version 16. So nvm ls remote. Can I just do... Let's look at nvmrc real fast. Just Google nvmrc. If I just put 16, will that be okay? Or do I need to do like .x.x? Let's just try putting 16 in there. Let's see, v16. See if it gets upset. Now we'll try nvm install. Perfect. I grabbed 9.1. That's exactly what we wanted. So let's just double check that we're on the right version. Okay. All right. Now let's start running some next commands here. We're recommending creating a new Next.js app using create next app, which sets up everything automatically for you. Yep, that's cool. I like that. Create next app. Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, and I do want TypeScript. Cancel. But I also need to know, is this... I need to pass it the directory is what I'm wondering. Create next app. I don't know. Maybe. MPX. Create next app with TypeScript. Oh. This is where you're going to create a directory, huh? I knew it. It's fine. We'll move everything out of there. Directory. It's probably also going to create its own Git repo. I know it did that with the Create React app. Okay, so we need to move everything in ChevCast TV into this directory. Start. I just forgot that it tries to perform operations on the current directory and up directory things, which is really strange. But okay. All right, so we're good now. Now we can remove that directory. Oh my god. All right, that looks good now. Okay, if you want to start with TypeScript, we did that. Follow the instructions to start the development server. Okay, let's go browse our project here. So let's look at package.json first. That's the file that defines every Node app. We're going to see a lot of blue squigglies. It's a program I have for spell checking, which I really like, but it does mean I tediously have to add things that I know are not misspelled to its dictionary. So sorry about those. We'll catch them as we go. Scripts. Next dev, next build, next start, next lint. Did it already? Oh, yeah, it already ran npm install. Let's see. Got some styles in here. Not sure what that file's for, but it says it shouldn't be edited, so we'll leave it alone. It's a TypeScript definition file, but looks like it's something that it wants to auto-generate, so that's fine. React strict mode true. Import next config. Okay. Oh, we populated our README here. Oh, okay. All right, that's fine. We'll keep the changes. Also filled in our git ignore with more. Did it pop out our .env? Did. That later. Our TypeScript configuration. Yes, next. Okay. I'm just going to trust what it's given us for now. We have an index component here. Looks like it's just going to be a pretty straightforward little thing here. Let's go ahead and run. Oops, nope, I didn't want that. No. How do I just close one of these? There we go. Okay, what I want is to move this. How do I move this to the top, to the right side? Ah, there we go. That's better. npm start. Oh. Could not find a production build. Try building your app with next build. Well, what if I don't want to start the production server? Is there a dev server? Ah, next dev. Okay. npm run dev. Awesome. That's a localhost 3000. Great. That was easy. Okay. So we're going to have to totally blow away this component, but it's cool that I thought we were going to get a demonstration of the routing, but all this does is take you straight to their website. Okay. All right. Well, we don't need any of that. Let's go ahead and see what happens. Let's see. How do I just, is closing that kill my terminal? No, okay. Bear with me, getting used to some stuff still. All right, index. Oh, that's cool. I already have an API directory. Welcome to Next.js. John Doe. Do we actually make a call for that in here at all? No. So we don't get an example of actually calling the API? Well, that's silly. You silly goose. All right. The iRoutes introduction. Okay, well, that's good. Kind of like that. I like the structure this brings to the app. It's pretty cool. All right, so we can make this a little bigger. Aha, sweet. All right, well, I don't see any reason to not just delete half of this stuff. We'll leave the fave icon. In fact, we'll just leave the head section there for now. We'll just change this part. Cool. So we are running a live reload. That's kind of nice. Styles.main, styles.title, styles.container. Import styles from home.module.css. Wow, that's pretty cool, actually. It just imports the style file as an object, and then you reference, say, styles.container. Where's container? Right there. So the classes just become properties on the object. What if you need to do a... Interesting. We'll have to read. In fact, you know what? After this, why don't we just go diving into Next documentation, fiddle with it? I mean, this whole session today might just be screwing around with Next, just to make sure we know everything that's coming in this toolkit here. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Styles.container. Height, padding, display, flex, direction column. Justify content center. Items center height. So what are the items that are in here? Does this use some kind of CSS engine? I don't think it does. Next config. Nope. So we're not using stylus or Sass or anything like that as far as I can tell. But I did want to mess with it a little bit. So somehow this imports, it's got to be Webpack importing that, right? I don't know. You know what? Let's just read before we mess. Because it'll be more fun to mess with stuff as we learn about it. So let's go to the documentation. Okay, manual setup. Starts the production server, starts in development mode. Lint. Oh, that's cool. Okay. Built around the concept of pages. Pages a React component exported from a .js, JSX, TSX. Oh, pages directly. Pages are associated with a route based on their file name. For example, pages/about.js is mapped to /about. That's nice. Don't have to do any plumbing for the routing, which is cool. Okay, start developing application. Automatic compilation bundling with Webpack and Babel. Nice. React fast refresh. What is that? New hot reloading experience that gives you instantaneous feedback on edits made to your React components. It is now enabled by default for all projects. Hot reloading has existed for a long time, but has historically been too fragile to enable by default in your workflow. Because of this, Next.js previously implemented a coarse form of hot reloading that would reset the entire state of your application. The old hot reloading implementation was not resilient to compilation or runtime errors and would perform a full reload of your application if you made a typo while editing your CSS or JavaScript. Yes, that's how it currently is with Create React app. This is suboptimal interrupted your train of thought. Fast refresh deeply integrates into React itself via React refresh, allowing Next.js to perform predictable precision updates to your React component tree. This means Next.js will only update code in the file you edited and only re-render that component without losing component state. Wow, that's actually really cool. Okay, awesome. That's cool. Good to know. Static generation of server-side rendering of pages. So is that on by default? Let's test this out. Let's see. We need another page. Let's do an about page. Okay, and then the app page, the one that contains. Where's our static file that it generates? Is it not exposed to us? Is it something that's done programmatically? Static. Webpack development. Chunks, pages. Interesting. Obviously, I'm not meant to be dinking around in here, but I'm really curious. So somehow, you know what I want to do? I want to run npm run build. I want it to build the build directory Failed to compile. Oh, just okay. Yes, because I just created an empty file. Oops. So let's just delete it for now. Since I didn't even do anything with it yet. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, so I expected that to create a build directory, but it did not. I guess the build must live in this .next folder. Okay. Yeah, it's got some build metadata in there of some kind, so I guess that's correct. Static. Ah, there we are, index HTML. Easier to read. Okay, so I'm glad I didn't delete anything in that one file, because actually what needs to happen in here in index is it pulls the content out of these elements and puts them where they're supposed to go. Interesting. So main is like body, head. Because yeah, in this guy, it's like home container, home main. Somehow it puts stuff into this head area. All right, I'm not gonna worry about it. Next is trying to save me from having to understand this stuff. I'm just a sucker for knowing how stuff works under the hood, but it's fine. If we need to butt our heads against it later, we can. For now, though, I want to try running the production build now that we built it. So, did that work? Oh, yeah, cool. Okay. That still works. Magic. Okay. Oh, let's run the dev again, because when we make changes, I'd like to see those happen in real time. Okay. So static generation of server-side rendering. I think that's a page we're going to want to read real fast. Static file serving. I think that one's going to be pretty straightforward. Aha, pages. We'll read about pages, CSS support. Yeah, we'll read about the CLI. Okay. Let's actually look at pages first. Okay, so get some water here. In Next.js, a page is a React component exported for the following extensions, files in the pages directory. Each page is associated with a route based on its file name. If you create pages of /about, it exports a React component to the below will be accessible /about. Okay, that makes sense. Dynamic routes use the square brackets. How do you pull in the data, though, is my question. For example, if you create a file, so it will be accessible at post/1, post/2, etc. Okay, that makes sense. I want to read about dynamic routing. Pre-rendering. Actually, maybe we'll just go through this one by one here. So let's actually just close all of these. And we'll just scroll down through all of these. Okay, by default, Next.js pre-renders every page. This means that Next.js generates HTML for each page in advance. Instead of having it all done by client-side JavaScript, pre-rendering can result in better performance and SEO. Oh yeah, that's right. We were going to test our little about. Let's do that real fast. Okay. So new file, about.tsx. And then where's next page be? Oh, interesting. Okay. Let's just copy all of this. Is there a export default home? Okay. My hell. Oh, my hell. Come on. Why do you hate me? Oh, because I'm not returning anything. Okay. Next head, image, styles. That was just to add the title. I feel like there should be a place to set this. All right. Just copy that in there then. Oh, do I need to? And this is all, oh, it's in a return. Is that? Aha. Well, we'll worry about that later. I don't know why I have to do head and footer on every page. There's got to be a way to do like a layout style page where I can keep these the same somehow. Unless maybe if I just don't include it, we'll test that. But let's do this guy. H1 about page. Okay, let's go over here and look. /about. Okay, that worked. Now the real test, though. Well, actually, no. The real test would be to do this. View page source. Does it say about page in here? does. Cool. Server-side rendering worked. The content's there, even without JavaScript running. Nice. Okay, so let's learn about that a little more. Each generated HTML is associated with minimal JavaScript code necessary for that page. When a page is loaded by the browser, its JavaScript code runs and makes the page fully interactive. This process is called hydration. Two forms of pre-rendering. Next.js has two forms of pre-rendering, static generation and server-side rendering. The difference is when it generates the HTML for a page. Static generation, recommended. The HTML is generated at build time and will be used on each request. Okay, so the About Us page would be a good one for that. Server-side rendering. The HTML is generated on each request. Importantly, Next.js lets you choose which pre-rendering form you'd like to use for each page. You can create a hybrid Next.js app by using static generation for most pages and using server-side rendering for others. We recommend using static generation over server-side rendering for performance reasons, obviously. Statically generated pages can be cached by CDN with no extra configuration to boost performance. However, in some cases, server-side rendering might be the only option. Yes, because on pages like our homepage, for example, we are going to be dynamically pulling in content from our YouTube videos, our streams, our podcast feeds, and that stuff can change. So we don't want those to be rendered at build time. We want those to be rendered on request. You can also use client-side rendering along with static generation or server-side rendering. That means some parts of a page can be rendered entirely by client-side JavaScript. To learn more, take a look at the data fetching documentation. Okay, get there. We're almost there. If a page uses static generation, the page HTML is generated at build time. That means in production, the page HTML is generated when you run next build. This HTML will then be reused on each request, and it can be cached by a CDN. In Next.js, you can statically generate pages with or without data. Let's take a look at each case. Static generation without data. By default, Next.js pre-renders pages using static generation without fetching data. Here's an example. Okay, so there's our little about page. Note that this page does not need to fetch any external data to be pre-rendered. In cases like this, Next.js generates a single HTML file per page during build time. Static generation with data. Okay, let's see how that works. Some pages require fetching external data for pre-rendering. There are two scenarios, and one or both might apply. In each case, you can use these functions that Next.js provides. Your page content depends on external data. Use getStaticProps. Okay, your page paths depend on external data. Use getStaticPaths, usually in addition to getStaticProps. Your page paths depend on external data? Not quite sure what that means. Like the URL? Okay, scenario one. Your page content depends on external data. Example, your blog page might need to fetch the list of blog posts from a CMS. Okay. Need to fetch posts by calling some API endpoint before this page can be pre-rendered. To fetch this data on pre-render, Next.js allows you to export an async function called getStaticProps from the same file. This function gets called at build time and lets you pass fetched data to the page's props on pre-render. Okay, there's getStaticProps, async. We go somewhere, we get posts, we get the JSON, and then we return those on the props object, which comes in here. Okay, that makes sense. Scenario 2, your page paths depend on external data. Allows you to create pages with dynamic routes. Okay, so it was talking about the URL. For example, you can create a file called pages posts ID to show a single blog post based on a changing ID. This will allow you to show a blog post with ID 1 when you access posts 1. However, which ID you want to pre-render at build time might depend on external data. Example, suppose you've only added one blog post with ID 1 to the database. In this case, you'd only want to pre-render posts 1 at build time. Later, you might add the second post with ID 2. Then you'd want to pre-render posts 2 as well. Okay. That's a lot of statically stored HTML, isn't it? You're actually going to go to the database and pull out all the blog posts and pre-render each one? So your page paths that are pre-rendered depend on external data. To handle this, Next.js lets you export an async function called getStaticPaths from a dynamic page. Pages, posts, ID in this case. This function gets called at build time and lets you specify which paths you want to pre-render. Okay, so at build time, we're running npm run build. And it's doing all this to build our production app. And then during that time, it's going to call... This function gets called at build time. Okay, it's going to call and fetch our posts from our database or wherever, some external endpoint. And then it's going to... Oh, I see what we're doing. We're iterating over all the posts from the database and creating a params. Let's see. We're returning an object with a params property with the parameter from the URL, so in our case, ID. And then we're taking the post ID off of the post from the database and populating that. Wow, okay. We'll pre-render only these paths at build time. Fallback false means other routes should 404. Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. So that's actually cool. That means I was thinking about building a new blog soon. Definitely going to use Next for that because this is cool. Also, in Pages Post ID, you need to export getStaticProps so that you can fetch the data about the post with this ID and use it to pre-render the page. Wait, so I have to fetch again? That seems interesting. Why can't I reuse the data that I already pulled? Why do I have to fetch twice? I guess if it's a build time, it doesn't matter, right? If we call twice, it's build time. It's not like this is happening on every page load. Okay, that's fine. That is fine. Oh, I forgot to load the chat app. Okay. When should I use static generation? We recommend using static generation with and without data whenever possible because your page can be built once and served by CDN, which makes it much faster than having a server render on the page every request. You can use static generation for many types of pages, including marketing pages, blog posts, e-commerce product listings, help, and documentation. You should ask yourself, can I pre-render this page ahead of a user's request? If the answer is yes, then you should choose static generation. On the other hand, static generation is not a good idea if you cannot pre-render a page ahead of a user's request. Maybe your page shows frequently updated data and the page content changes on every request. In cases like this, you can do one of the following. Use static generation with client-side rendering. You can skip pre-rendering some parts of the page and then use client-side JavaScript to populate them. To learn more about this approach, check out the data fetching documentation. Use server-side rendering. Next.js pre-renders a page on each request. It will be slower because the page cannot be cached by a CDN, but the pre-rendered page will always be up to date. We'll talk about this approach below. My concern about pre-rendering a blog, for example, is it's going to pull the posts out of the database and pre-render those pages. But what if we add a new post to the database? Does that not get added to the site until the whole app is rebuilt? Because that seems weird. Especially with the whole fallback false means other routes should 404. I guess we'll find more out on that data fetching page. To use server-side rendering for a page, you need to export an async function called getServerSideProps. This function will be called by the server on every request. For example, suppose that your page needs to pre-render frequently updated data fetched from an external API. You can write get server-side props, which fetches the data and passes it to page like below. Okay. Similar to get static props, but the difference is that get server-side props is run on every request instead of on build time. Okay. Discuss two forms of pre-rendering for Next.js. The HTML is generated at build time. Be reused on each request. To make a stat, let me check on my piggies. Oh, it's 5. Okay, well, no piggies have been at the door for the last hour, so they're not begging for food yet. All right, let's finish this pages thing, and then I'll go feed them. We've discussed two forms of pre-rendering for Next.js: static generation, server-side rendering. I get these. All right. So next is data fetching. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I will be right back. I'm going to go feed my animals. Probably take like 10 minutes. Hopefully not that long, but about that long. So I will be right back. Okay. All right, let's do this. Ooh, it's a little hot in here now. Okay, let's pick up where we left off. All right, looks like the data fetching is going to have most of the stuff we're interested in here. Let's get some more water. Normally, I just read these on my own, but I want to read them out for the stream for anybody who is interested in following along. Okay. In the page's documentation, we explain that Next.js has two forms of pre-rendering, static generation and server-side rendering. In this page, we'll talk in depth about data fetching strategies for each case. We recommend you to read through the page's documentation first if you haven't done so. We'll talk about the three unique Next.js functions that you can use to fetch data for pre-rendering: static props, static path, and server-side props. In addition, we'll talk briefly about how to fetch data on the client side. Great. That was one of my next questions. Hold on. All right. Blow my nose. Okay. Okay, if you export an async function, I'll get static props. Okay, and then it returns the props. Okay, context parameter is an object containing the following keys. Oh, okay. Params contains the route parameters for pages using dynamic routes. For example, if the page name is id.js, then params will look like id ... To learn more, take a look at the dynamic routing documentation. You should use this together with get static paths, which we'll explain later. Okay, yeah, got it. Preview is true if the page is in the preview mode and undefined otherwise. Preview mode. So we'll get there. We get there. Preview data contains the preview data set by set preview data. Okay. Locale. Locales. Default locale. Get static props should return an object with props, an optional object with the props that will be received by the page component. Okay. Revalidate, an optional amount in seconds after which a page regeneration can occur. Defaults to false. When revalidate is false, it means that there is no revalidation, so the page will be cached as built until your next build. More on incremental state regeneration. Okay, not found. An optional Boolean value to allow the page to return a 404 status and page. Below is an example of how it works. Oh, okay, cool. So you can just say return not found if your external resource is unavailable. That's nice. You don't return a 404 even if there was a successfully generated page before. This is meant to support use cases like user-generated content getting removed by its author. Okay. An optional redirect value to allow redirecting to internal and external resources should match the shape of destination string, permanent, Boolean. In some rare cases, you might need to assign a custom status code for older HTTP clients to properly redirect. In these cases, you can use the status code property instead of the permanent property, but not both. Well, that's exactly how it works. Redirecting is at build time is not allowed. Import modules in top-level scope. For use in get static props, imports used in get static props will not be bundled for the client side. This means you can write server-side code directly in get static props. This includes reading from the file system or a database. You should not use fetch to call an API route in get static props. Instead, directly import the logic used inside your API route. You may need to slightly refactor your code for this approach. Okay, just because they're saying you're adding an extra layer of network I/O for no reason, when you can just import the API function itself. Okay. Example. Here's an example which uses get static props to fetch a list of blog posts from a CMS. The example is also in the Pages documentation. Direct database queries. Okay, which now we'd want to do an API and then import that API function. When should I use get static props? So the data required to render the page is available at build time ahead of the user's request. The data comes from a headless CMS. The data can be publicly cached, not user specific. What the hell's a headless CMS? Okay, so a database. Okay. Page will be pre-rendered for SEO and be very fast. Okay, this is what I was curious about. Okay, so this is the case where we add a new blog post to our database, and I'm like, does that mean that that blog post is just a 404 until you rebuild the site, which would suck? Next.js allows you to create or update static pages after you've built your site. Incremental static regeneration, ISR, enables you to use static generation on a per-page basis without needing to rebuild the entire site. With ISR, you can retain the benefits of static while scaling to millions of pages. Consider our previous get static props example, but now with incremental static regeneration enabled through the revalidate property. Okay, so here's our blog component, takes in posts, and then drops some LIs for the post titles. Okay, this function gets called at build time on the server, may be called again on a serverless function if revalidation is enabled and a new request comes in. Okay, revalidate 10 seconds. Next.js will attempt to regenerate the page when a request comes in at most once every 10 seconds. This function gets called at build time on the server. It may be called again on a serverless function if the path has not been generated. We'll pre-render only these paths at build time. Fallback blocking will server render pages on demand if the path doesn't exist. There it is. There it is. That's the one for the blog right there. When a request is made to a page that was pre-rendered at build time, it will initially show the cached page. Any requests to the page after the initial request and before 10 seconds are also cached and instantaneous. Before 10 seconds are also cached and instantaneous. After the 10-second window, the next request will still show the cached stale page. Next.js triggers a regeneration of the page in the background. Once the page has been successfully generated, Next.js will invalidate the cache and show the updated product page. If the background regeneration fails, the old page will stay unaltered. When a request is made to a path that hasn't been generated, Next.js will server render the page on the first request. Future requests will serve the static file from the cache. Sweet. Reading files use process.current working directory. Files can be read directly from the file system in get static props. In order to do so, you have to get the full path to a file. Since Next.js compiles your code into a separate directory, you can't use dir name as the path. Instead, you can use process.cwd, which gives you the directory where Next.js is being executed. I don't think we give a shit about this. I would always be pulling it from a database. Only runs at build time because getStaticProps runs at build time. It does not receive data that's only available during request time, such as query parameters or HTTP headers, as it generates static HTML. Write server-side code directly. Note that getStaticProps runs only on the server side. It will never be run on the client side. It won't even be included in the JS bundle for the browser. That means you can write code such as direct database queries without them being sent to browsers. You should not fetch an API route from getStaticProps. Instead, you can write the server-side code directly in getStaticProps. You can use this tool to verify what Next.js eliminates from the client-side bundle. It's fine, not really. Statically generates both HTML and JSON. When a page with getStaticProps is pre-rendered at build time, in addition to the page HTML file, Next.js generates a JSON file holding the result of running getStaticProps. This JSON file will be used in client-side routing through next/link documentation or next/router documentation. Okay. When you navigate to a page that's pre-rendered using getStaticProps, Next.js fetches this JSON file pre-computed at build time and uses it as the props for the page component. This means that client-side page transitions will not call getStaticProps, as only the exported JSON is used. When using incremental static generation, getStaticProps will be executed out of band to generate the JSON needed for the client-side navigation. You may see this in the form of multiple requests being made for the same page. However, this is intended and has no impact on end-user performance. One thing is, it sounded to me like the end user is going to see a cached page. and then either have to refresh or like wait 10 seconds and then the page will magically update itself. But I don't like that though. Like, we'll have to just see how it actually plays out. Get static props can only be exported from a page. You can't export it from non-page files. One of the reasons for this restriction is that React needs to have all the required data before the page is rendered. Also, you must use export async function getStaticProps. It will not work if you add getStaticProps as a property of the page component. I understand why they have to put that there because some people are dumb, but I can't imagine reading this documentation and then being like, oh, this is a method on the component. Okay. Runs on every request in development. In development, next dev, getStaticProps will be called on every request. Oh, okay, that's good to know. Preview mode. In some cases, you might want to temporarily bypass static generation and render the page at request time instead of build time. For example, you might be using a headless CMS and want to preview drafts before they're published. This use case is supported by Next.js by the feature called preview mode. Okay. Get static paths. If a page has dynamic routes, documentation. Oh, there's a link. If a page has dynamic routes and uses getStaticProps, it needs to define a list of paths that have to be rendered to the HTML at build time. If you export an async function called getStaticPaths from a page that uses dynamic routes, Next.js will statically pre-render all the paths specified by getStaticPaths. So if you export an async function from a page that uses dynamic routes, Next.js will statically all the paths specified. Okay. Just read just a more technical description of what we already knew. The paths key determines which paths will be pre-rendered. For example, suppose that you have a page that uses dynamic routes named pages posts ID. If you export getStaticPaths from this page and return the following for paths, params ID1, params ID2, the Next.js will statically generate posts 1 and post 2 at build time using the page component in pages posts ID. Note that the value for each params must match the parameters used in the page name. If the page name is pages posts ID comment ID, then params should contain post ID and comment ID. If the page name uses catch-all routes, for example, pages and then a slug, then params should contain slug, which is an array. For example, if this array is foo bar, then Next.js will statically generate the page at foo bar. If the page uses an optional catch-all route, supply null, empty array, undefined, or false to render the rootmost route. For example, if you supply slug false for pages, Next.js will statically generate the page. Weird. Okay. The fallback key required. The object returned by getStaticPaths must contain a Boolean fallback key. Fallback is false, then any paths not returned by getStaticPaths will result in a 404 page. You can do this if you have a small number of paths to pre-render, so they are all statically generated during build time. It's also useful when the new pages are not added often. If you add more items to the data source and need to render the new pages, you need to run the build again. Okay, so that's what I thought with the fallback false. Here's an example which pre-renders one blog post per page called pages post ID. The list of blog posts will be fetched from a CMS and returned by getStaticPaths. Then for each page, it fetches the post data from a CMS using getStaticProps. This example is also in the pages documentation. Okay, yeah, we saw that. This does mean, though, the build needs to be rerun for new blog posts to get added, which means you need to rebuild and deploy your app. If fallback is true, then the behavior of getStaticProps changes. The paths returned from getStaticPaths will be rendered to HTML at build time by getStaticProps. Paths that have not been generated at build time will not result in a 404 page. Instead, Next.js will serve a fallback version of the page on the first request to such a path. See Fallback Pages below for details. In the background, Next.js will statically generate the requested path HTML and JSON. This includes running getStaticProps. When that's done, the browser receives the JSON for the generated path. This will be used to automatically render the page with the required props. From the user's perspective, the page will be swapped from the fallback page to the full page. At the same time, Next.js adds this path to the list of pre-rendered pages. Subsequent requests to the same path will serve the generated page, like other pages pre-rendered at build time. Fallback pages. In the fallback version of a page, the page's props will be empty. Using the router, you can detect if a fallback is being rendered. Router.isFallback will be true. Here's an example that uses isFallback. Okay, use router. Okay, so we can do a loading. That's nice. Perfect. When is fallback true useful? Fallback true is useful if your app has a very large number of static pages that depend on data. Think a very large e-commerce site. You want to pre-render all product pages, but then your builds would take forever. Instead, you may statically generate a small subset of pages and use fallback true for the rest. When someone requests a page that's not generated yet, the user will see the page with a loading indicator. Shortly after getStaticProps finishes, and the page will be rendered with the requested data. From now on, everyone who requests the same page will get the statically pre-rendered page. This ensures that users always have a fast experience while preserving fast builds and the benefits of static generation. Fallback true will not update generated pages. For that, take a look at incremental static regeneration. Just regenerates the paths. Okay. The fallback is blocking. If fallback is blocking, new paths returned by getStaticPaths will wait for the HTML to be generated, identical to SSR, hence why blocking, and then be cached for future requests, so it only happens once per path. GetStaticProps will behave as follows. The paths returned from getStaticPaths will be rendered to HTML at build time. The paths that have not been generated at build time will not result in a 404 page. Instead, Next will server-side render on the first request and return the generated HTML. When that's done, the browser receives the HTML for the generated path. From the user's perspective, it will transition from the browser is requesting the page to the full page is loaded. There is no flash of loading or fallback state. So that's when they go directly there. Right? Yeah. At the same time, Next.js adds this path to the list of pre-rendered pages. Subsequent requests to the same path will serve the generated page like other pages pre-rendered at build time. Fallback blocking will not update generated pages by default. To update generated pages, use incremental static regeneration in conjunction with fallback blocking. TypeScript, you can use the getStaticPaths type. Okay. Okay, runs on every requested development. If you export an async function called getServerSideProps from a page, Next will pre-render the page on each request using the data returned by getServerSideProps. The context parameters and object contain the following keys. Params. This page uses a dynamic route. Params contains the route parameters. Okay, good to know. Request, response, query, any query strings, preview. Preview is true if the page is in the preview mode and false otherwise. See preview documentation. Preview data. Preview data set by set preview data. See the preview mode. Resolved URL. A normalized version of the request URL that strips the next data prefix for client transitions and includes original query values. Locales, default locale. Props. It needs to be on the returned object. Not found. Redirect. You can import modules in top-level scope for use in get server-side props. Imports used in get server-side props will not be bundled for the client side. This means you can write server-side code directly in get server-side props. This includes reading the file system database. You should not use fetch to call. Okay, we read those. Okay, yeah, passes it in, renders the data. Piggy's wanting to come inside. Yep, looks like we got a piggy waiting to come in. So I will be right back. Okay. I may have to get up several times because the pigs love to make sure they don't come in when I ask. But they do come in the moment I close the door. Very typical. I leave my camera up on my phone here so I can see when piggies want in. Okay. Get server-side props type. Okay, that's good. If you want to get for typing, skip. Yep, we got that. Only runs on the server side and never runs on the browser. If a page uses get server-side props, then when you request this page directly, get server-side props runs at the request time, and this page will be pre-rendered with the returned props. When you request this page on client-side page transitions through next/link documentation or next/router, Next.js sends an API request to the server, which runs get server-side props. It'll return JSON that contains the result of running get server-side props, and the JSON will be used to render the page. All this work will be handled automatically by Next.js, so you don't need to do anything extra as long as you have get server-side props defined. Okay. Only allowed in the page. Yep, we know that. Okay, here we go. Fetching data on the client side. If your page contains frequently updated data and you don't need to pre-render the data, you can fetch the data on the client side. An example of this is user-specific data. Here's how it works. First, immediately show the page without data. Parts of the page can be pre-rendered using static generation. You can show loading states for missing data. Then fetch the data on the client side and display it when ready. This approach works well for user dashboard pages, for example, because a dashboard is private, user-specific page, SEO is not relevant, and the page doesn't need to be pre-rendered. The data is frequently updated, which requires request time data fetching. SWR. The team behind Next has created a React hook for data fetching called SWR. We highly recommend it if you're fetching data on the client side. It handles caching, revalidation, focus tracking, refetching on interval, and more. And you can use it like so. Use SWR. Fetch URL. Fetch. Fetcher. I knew it. Piggy at the back door. All right, I'll be right back again. Okay, I am back. SWR. Focus tracking. SWR documentation. Stale while revalidate. Okay. Huh. That's cool. Really cool, actually. All right. Built-in CSS support. I was curious about this. Next allows you to import CSS files from a JavaScript file. This is possible because Next.js extends the concept. Oh, wait, were those not CSS files? Oh, no, they are. Okay. They're not formatted like a JS or JSON file either. Allows you to import CSS. Let's see. Allows you to import CSS files from JavaScript files. Next extends the concept of import beyond JavaScript. I mean, Webpack already does that. Are you just claiming that's a Next thing? Because that's a Webpack thing. To add a style sheet to your application, import the CSS file within Pages. App. I see. Okay. But where does it import the home one? Okay, right here. Okay, that's to add a global style sheet. Gotcha. For example, consider the following style sheet named styles.css. Body. Okay. Okay, so that's the global. That's fine. That's a Webpack thing already. Due to the global nature of style sheets and avoid conflicts, you may only import them inside app.js. Okay, cool. In development, expressing style sheets this way allows your styles to be hot reloaded as you edit them, meaning you can keep application state. In production, all CSS files will be automatically concatenated into a single minified CSS file. Since Next 954, importing CSS file from node modules is permitted anywhere in your application. For global style sheets like Bootstrap or End Progress, you should import the file inside Pages apps, for example. Import Bootstrap dist CSS. Oh, sweet, cool. For importing CSS required by a third-party component, you can do so in your component, for example. Adding component level CSS. Next.js supports CSS modules using the name.module.css file naming convention. CSS modules locally scope CSS by automatically creating a unique class name. This allows you to use the same CSS class name in different files without worrying about collisions. Yes, that is nice. This behavior makes CSS modules the ideal way to include component level CSS. CSS module files can be imported anywhere in your application. For example, consider a reusable button component in the components folder. First, create components button.module.css with the following content. Okay. Cool. Mouse extension, regular link, style sheets, and global CSS files are still supported. In production, all CSS module files will be automatically concatenated into many minified and code split CSS files. These files represent hot execution paths in your application, ensuring the minimal amount of CSS is loaded for your application to paint. Sass support. Yay. Okay. Next.js allows you to import Sass using both the SCSS and the Sass extensions. You can use module level Sass via CSS modules and the module.scss or Sass extension. Before you can use Next.js built-in Sass support, be sure to install Sass. I don't think we'll need Sass for this application, but that's nice to know we can use it if we do. The simplest one is Inline Styles. We bundle styled JSX to provide support for isolated scoped CSS. The aim is to support shadow CSS, similar to web components, which unfortunately do not support server rendering and are JS only. See the above examples for other popular CSS in JS solutions like styled components. A component using styled JSX looks like this. Ooh, boy. We're going to just go ahead and avoid inline CSS. How about that? Does it work with JavaScript disabled? Yes. If you disable JavaScript, the CSS will still be loaded in the production build. During development, we require JavaScript to be enabled to provide the best developer experience with fast refresh. Related, for more information on what to do next, we recommend the following sections. Oh, let's find layouts. Ah, yes. Okay. The React model allows us to deconstruct a page into a series of components. Many of these components are often reused between pages. For example, you might have the same navigation bar and footer on every page. Nav bar, footer, examples, single shared layout with custom app. If you only have one layout for your entire application, you can create a custom app and wrap your application with the layout. Since the layout component is reused when changing pages, its component state will be preserved, e.g. input values. My app. So this is in app.js, so like here. My app, okay. And then it's got component. If you need multiple layouts, you can add a property get layout to your page, allowing you to return a React component for the layout. This allows you to define the layout on a per page basis. Since we're returning a function, we can have complex nested layouts if desired. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. I don't really need that, but that's cool. Navigating between pages, we want to persist page state, input values, scroll position, etc. for a single page application experience. Yes, please. This layout pattern enables state persistence because the React component tree is maintained between page transitions. With the component tree, React can understand which elements have changed to preserve state. This process is called reconciliation, which is how React understands which elements have changed. When using TypeScript, you must first create a new type for your pages, which includes the getLayout function. Then you must create a new type for your app props, which overrides the component property to use the previously created type. Let's create a new type for your app props, which overrides the component property to use the previously created type. Okay, what? Index, React element, layout, nested layout. Okay. There's our page. We return our page content, page.getLayout. Is that this? Is that the override? Is this an augmentation? I didn't know you could do that in TypeScript. That's cool. Okay. And include the get layout. Inside your layout, you can fetch data on the client side using useEffect or a library like SWR. Because this file is not a page, you cannot use it. Oops. Okay, use SWR. I'm just thinking about this because I think one of the first calls we're going to have to make is whether or not a user is logged in. Hmm. I don't know. We'll worry about that later, I guess. Since version 10 Next has a built-in image component and automatic image optimization, extension of HTML image element evolved for the modern web, resizing, optimizing, and serving images in modern formats like WebP when the browser supports it. This avoids shipping large images to devices with a smaller viewport. What? I've seen WebP. What does that do? Why is that so great? Well, I'm not going to bore through that. Allows Next.js to automatically adopt future image formats and serve them to browsers that support those formats. Works with any image source, even if the image is hosted by an external data source like CMS, it can still be optimized. Instead of optimizing images at build time, Next.js optimizes images on demand as users request them. Unlike static site generators and static-only solutions, your build times aren't increased, whether shipping 10 images or 10 million images. Images are lazy loaded by default. That means your page speed isn't penalized for images outside the viewport. If images load as they are scrolled into the viewport, images are always rendered in such a way as to avoid cumulative layout shift. Oh, I know what that is. Core Web Vital that Google uses in search ranking. To add an image to your application, import the next image component. Okay, cool. Okay. Not going to be using a cloud provider. This is not. I'll come back to this if it becomes relevant. Interesting. Not sure if I really want to read all these optimizations. We don't care about that either. Yeah, that's fine. This is so cool. I'm gonna save this one for later. Okay. So don't do that. Not that I was going to. Okay. Oh, cool. That's good to know. Okay, sweet. Yes, and okay. Yeah. I hate dealing with ESLint. One of my least favorite things. Because it's a lot of work to configure it just to have it bark at you about stuff. I don't know. It does help. JS provides an integrated TypeScript experience out of the box. Electron IDE. Yep, oh yeah, that's good. I did see those. I'm checking next. Oh, okay, let's learn about environment variables. Built-in support for environment variables. Nice, I didn't know that. Which allows you to do the following. env.local to load environment variables. Expose environment variables to the browser by prefixing with next public. Shit, that's awesome. What the hell? How does that work? Guess I'm going to get there anyway. Okay. Support for loading environment variables into process.env. Cool. Kick ass. Node.js environment automatically allowing you to use them in Next.js data fetching methods and API routes. Sweet. I was just going to say, can I use them during build time? Obviously, the answer is yes. I guess it makes sense. We're reading process env. Duh. In order to keep server-only secrets safe, Next.js replaces process.env.star with the correct values at build time. This means that process.env is not a standard JavaScript object, so you're not able to use object destructuring. Environment variables must be referenced as e.g. Oh, okay. That's annoying. I'm glad I read that because I would have run into that and been annoyed at why it wasn't working. You can't use object destructuring. Oh, I didn't. I never realized that declaring this means at that time it creates this variable and assigns that value, which means. Okay, yeah, which means that if you do it that way, it will be. Okay, I get that now. All right. Automatically expand variables, $var, inside of your .env files. Reference other secrets like so. Cool. Okay, good to know. Gotta escape the dollar signs. Oh, this is what I'm interested in. By default, all environment variables loaded through .env.local are only available in the Node.js environment, meaning they won't be exposed to the browser. In order to expose a variable to the browser, you have to prefix the variable with next public, for example. This loads process.env.nextPublic analytics ID into the Node.js environment automatically, allowing you to use it anywhere in your code. The value will be inlined into JavaScript sent to the browser because of the next public prefix. This inlining occurs at build time, so your various next public envs need to be set when the project is built. Pages index.js, set analytics service. Oh, wow. So I can just grab that. Oh, you're still reading from process env? Interesting. Default environment variables. In general, only one env local file is needed. However, sometimes you might want to add some defaults for the development, next dev, or production, next start environment. Next.js allows you to set defaults in .env, all environments, .env.development, development environment, production environment. They define the defaults, I see. And then the .local should be added to the git ignore. I think it did that already, didn't it? We were looking at the git ignore. Yeah, it ignored all these. Which is good. Okay. Deploying your Next.js application to Vercel. The fuck's Vercel? Custom domains. This is cool. Definitely going to check this out. Okay, good to know. I don't care. Do what you gotta do with the polyfills. All right, routing. Ugh. I've been sitting here longer than I expected to be, just reading. I think it might be time for a break. I didn't realize I turned my camera off for the whole time. I thought I turned it back on. All right. Well, I think I'm going to take a break, guys. And then probably pick this back up either to later tonight or tomorrow. Yeah, I think that's what we'll do. A lot of learning. So we're going over the documentation. I'm going to finish that. I might just finish that on my own instead of on stream. Just chill on the couch and read the rest of it. Because all we got to go over now is routing, API routes, some deployment stuff. This is also stuff that maybe we could just skip and just go, get to when it becomes relevant. I do want to take a peek in the advanced features, especially preview mode. Excuse me. I'm interested in dynamic imports too. Most of these are only going to become relevant as I run into some issue where I need to customize some default behavior. Yeah, I think we'll call that good for now. We've mostly got what we needed out of this documentation. I like to sit down and do this. I know it's time consuming to sit and read, but as long as if you take the time to do that, though, I already feel comfortable. I already know pretty much exactly what I need to do to begin building into this app structure, thanks to good documentation. They took the time to write the documentation. At least I could do before I write code is take the time to read it, right? So that way I know what I'm getting here. But this time I'm taking to read this is going to save me a lot of time in the future. We have built-in fast reload for development. We have built-in tests. We have a built-in URL routing, API routing, built-in page support, built-in static rendering on the server. Like Next provides a lot of stuff. I've just never used it. I've heard about it, but I've never used it. I looked into it a little bit for a project at work, and I'm like, this is actually really cool. I think it's overkill for what we're doing at work because we need a lot of custom stuff for this app we're building at work. But for the app I want to build now for ChevCast, I think it's great. And so I'm glad we took the time to read it. One of the next steps I want to do when I come back on here, probably tomorrow or Sunday or sometime, is we're going to go back over these here. We're going to start looking into the APIs. So we'll probably build out like a very basic app structure here. Like we'll just like put in some placeholder pages for all the pages we want and stuff like that. And then I'm going to start building some sort of API handler to talk to these other APIs. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do that, but I want to have like little stubs of functionality for talking to all of these things. And then we're going to work on authentication with Discord, because our app is going to use Discord authentication for the users, because it's kind of it's going to tie really nice and neat with our Discord community server. I just want that integration to be as solid as possible. So we're going to start there, make sure we can get users logged in and read their data and stuff appropriately. So thanks for watching, guys. I might be back on later tonight. I don't know. We'll see.